Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, we're going to react to why American breakfasts are the way they are. So I was in the States last year, like November, and went to this American diner, which I really wanted to do, and ordered like a typical breakfast, which consisted of, I got 2 or 3 thick pancakes, some eggs, some super crispy bacon. And it was very different to a typical English breakfast, which is toast, baked beans, sausage, bacon, some fried eggs, some mushroom, and maybe some tomato. And because of the shared kind of history between the US and the UK, I thought the American breakfast would be a lot more similar to the UK breakfast, but it was completely different. It made me think, why? Why is it that pancakes and super crispy bacon have become the staples that they are in American breakfast? So yeah, hopefully this answers that question.
When you think of American breakfast food, you probably think of things like cereal and milk, toast, eggs, pancakes, French toast, orange juice, and coffee, or a McDonald's breakfast burrito. But few realize that there are actual factual reasons Americans eat the food they do at breakfast. Today, we're going to take a look at the reasons why American breakfasts are the way they are. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. After that, please leave us a comment and let us know what other corners of breakfast history you would like us to explore. Okay, wakey, it's eggs.
There's something about eggs and bacon, like being fried, that just always makes me hungry. Oh, it's like I can smell it.
And bakey. America runs on Dunkin' and Starbucks and Pete's. Also Folgers, Chock-full Nuts, Maxwell House, Gevalia. Long story short, America runs on coffee. But it wasn't always that way. Once upon a time, America's breakfast beverage of choice was actually tea, which makes sense since the US started out as British colonies and, well, you know how the British are with their tea. Tea? Tea was once as central to American life as it was in Britain. Both upper and middle-class colonists drank tea, both for its purported health benefits and as a social activity. You know, when you get together with your mates to clink saucers? That's probably what they called it, right?
No.
However, it was partly because of tea's strong association with British life that coffee wound up becoming the American breakfast drink of choice. In 1765, Britain passed the Stamp Act, imposing a series of taxes on goods. One of those goods being tea. The colonists were pretty unhappy with the act and responded with protests that included the famous Boston Tea Party. But some colonists went even further and boycotted the beverage altogether. Those brave souls turned to alternative beverages instead, like coffee. But it was really during the Civil War that coffee consumption in America increased dramatically. To improve their focus and endurance during the war, soldiers were given coffee rather than the standard rum and brandy. Because it's generally more advantageous to have your soldiers high on speed rather than drunk on well liquor. As more and more coffee was imported for the soldiers, demand for the drink expanded beyond the battlefield and into American homes. Fast forward about 150 years later, and there's a Starbucks on every corner. Kind of feels like that mermaid logo should be draped in an American flag.
I do love coffee, the smell of coffee in the morning, just it's almost like it's saying rise and shine. But I think they serve different purposes. Like coffee for me is if I feel a bit sort of lethargic and I need something to pep me up. Tea is more like I'm already kind of awake. I don't need any kind of super stimulus, but just a little bit of caffeine, a little bit.
Have been eating bread for about 10,000 years, give or take a few hundred. However, the invention of toast, which is essentially just burnt bread, is credited to the Romans who first toasted stale bread in order to preserve it. The idea was a big hit. It's hard to say no to that irresistible crunch, and toast remained a staple fare throughout the centuries. But it didn't find its permanent place on American breakfast plates until the 19th century, when the Seventh-day Adventist Church promoted it as a healthy, quick, and affordable breakfast. Back then, people made toast by holding it on a fork or in a frame by a fire or stove.
Wow.
In 1893, the Eclipse toaster was introduced as the world's first electric toaster.
In 1893.
But while it was a huge step forward, the machine toasted only one side at a time. so you still had to manually flip the bread. Which kind of makes it worthless. The whole point of a toaster is that you can watch Netflix on your phone while it does all the work for you. Come on, 1893, figure it out. Then, right around 1919, several technological advancements led to the invention of the automatic pop-up toaster. This was followed in 1928 by the invention of pre-sliced bread. It was the combination of these two inventions that made toast easily accessible nationwide. But what really cemented toast's place in American breakfast were changes in American work life. In the early 20th century, the working and middle classes found they no longer had time for the elaborate breakfast spreads of eras past. So rather than cook a full meal, homemakers started preparing breakfasts that were simple and quick. Thanks to the invention of the pop-up toaster and sliced bread, toast was a natural fit. Based on its
Yeah, toast. Oh my God. I used to eat so much toast back in the day. Like, oh my God. A typical breakfast for me would be 6, no joke, 6 slices of toast. Eaten as like in sandwiches. So one side butter, one side marmalade. And I'd have that 3 of those sandwiches. I used to be quite fat, to be fair. I used to be.
Most people probably assume that French toast is, French. Like French braids, French fries, or the French kiss. But it's not. In actuality, French toast doesn't have a single origin. The earliest known reference to this particular breakfast staple actually comes from an ancient Roman cookbook called Apicius. That recipe, which may date all the way back to the 1st century CE, calls for the chef to remove the crust from fine white bread, slice it into rather large pieces, soak those in beaten eggs and milk, then fry the concoction in oil. Once cooked, the book recommends covering the toast with honey. The author was presumably banished from polite society for this recipe, because what devilment would possess you to soak a hunk of bread in raw eggs?
French toast tastes the same whether it's in pieces or whether it's whole. I mean, bread is bread,
Various other versions of French toast continued to crop up all throughout Europe in the Middle Ages. Like regular toast, French toast was just a way to rehabilitate stale bread. It wasn't so much a luxurious dish reserved for the rich as it was a money saver for a thrifty crowd. So
yeah, what we do, we just beat some eggs. Like, let's say you want to make 3 slices of French toast. You probably need maybe 2 eggs for that, bit of butter, salt, pepper, beat the eggs, dip the bread, and fry. I don't really like my French toast super soggy. I like the egg to be a bit crispy around the edges.
How did this dish come to be known as French toast?
And
well,
no
one
honey
is
for me.
exactly sure. But in the
Just
U.S.,
eggy bread,
it used to be
basically.
called a lot of things, including German toast and Spanish toast. Kinda sounds like we should just call it European wet bread. Prior to the invention of cereal, Americans, for the most part, ate full, hearty breakfasts that included the same type of foods they'd eat at dinner. As time went on, however,
I had no
Americans
clue.
began experiencing frequent indigestion, and health experts quickly blamed breakfast as the cause.
Seriously, dude, light a candle.
Turns out you really shouldn't eat pizza anytime, even if it is on a bagel.
The sound of that deuce hitting the toilet. Bloop.
Experts argued for lighter, more nutrient-rich breakfasts, and voila, cereal was invented. In the 1870s, a fellow named James Caleb Jackson introduced granula, which was twice-baked pebbles of flour, to the United States. But as appetizing as twice-baked pebbles of flour sounds, there was a minor problem. Eating granula on its own was pretty much impossible. The pebbles were hard as rocks. An emergency dental trip was just waiting to happen. As a solution, Jackson's mother, Lucretia Edgerton Jackson, suggested soaking the granula in milk or warm water to make it edible. A short time later, a guy named John Harvey Kellogg, whose last name you probably recognize, came up with his own version of granula. Kellogg made a minor spelling adjustment to Jackson's product name and then gifted the world with what he called granola. Kellogg's granola started to take off, along with the practice of soaking it in milk or warm water, if you're some kind of maniac. Today, cereal is much softer and, crucially, edible all on its own, but most people still prefer to pour milk over it.
Yeah, 100%.
Today,
I used to eat so much Kellogg's Crunchy Nut and Cheerios, Honey Nut Cheerios. Oh man, those things were so good. Just full of sugar though.
orange juice is the classic breakfast beverage of choice for Americans when coffee and or booze isn't available. But that wasn't always the case.
Coffee or
The story of
booze.
OJ's regular place on our breakfast tables starts in the 1920s, when biochemist Elmer McCollum kicked off America's obsession with vitamins by touting their healing properties. Corporate America then picked up the ball and ran with it, particularly Sunkist, who began marketing daily doses of its canned orange juice as containing all the vitamins and nutrients a person needs. McCollum then switched gears and introduced America to acidosis, which he claimed was a buildup of acid in the bloodstream that could cause fatigue. To prevent this condition, McCollum suggested people eat lettuce and citrus fruits, which are full of acid.
To be fair, I mean, he's not entirely wrong though, because lactic acid is, it does cause weakness and fatigue in the muscles, and it does build up over time.
People in Sunkist's marketing department, who apparently just bought everything McCollum said, quickly latched on to the acidosis scare to promote its orange juice even more heavily than it did before. But it wasn't until after World War II that the drink's popularity at the breakfast table really picked up. During the war, the government needed a way to provide soldiers with vitamin C. So they charged all of their scientists with developing an orange juice that was superior to the canned variety commonly available at the time. It's unclear how they did this. Maybe they made the orange juice lift weights? Those scientists succeeded in their task, developing the product we now know as frozen concentrated orange juice.
Wow.
The problem was, they did it 3 years after the war had ended. Luckily, corporate America was only too happy to pick up their research. And by the 1950s, mass-produced fresh frozen orange juice was a staple in American pantries.
Quench your thirst with health. Quench your thirst with wonderful fresh frozen orange juice from Florida, the state of health.
Orange juice has solidified its reputation
state
as an
of
affordable,
health.
healthy breakfast beverage, although its supposed health benefits are dubious at best. Bagels, in their simplest form, round rolls with a hole in the center, have been traced all the way back to ancient Egypt. But the bagel as we know it, a perfect delivery system for fried eggs and cream cheese, can be traced to 14th century Poland.
Wow,
German
look how
immigrants
thin
who were
it
moving
is.
into the region at the time brought with them one of mankind's greatest inventions, the pretzel. Over time, those pretzels morphed into one of mankind's other greatest inventions, the modern bagel. Then, when Jadwiga of Poland, the first female monarch of the Kingdom of Poland, chose to eat bagels during Lent, they began to gain popularity among the nobility. As German
What would you have? What do you have in your bagel usually? Like for me, it's either egg mayonnaise with some black pepper on top, or egg and bacon, or Philadelphia cheese. Those are my three go-tos. And if I fancy something sweet, I'll probably have just a toasted bagel, butter on the top side, strawberry jam on the bottom side. What do you guys usually go for in your bagels?
migrating to Poland, Jewish immigrants were too. At the time, Christians banned Jewish people from making bread in many regions because of the food's connection to the rite of communion. But Poland became the first to allow Jewish people to bake and sell bread, including bagels. And it was late 19th century Jewish immigrants who first brought bagels to America. Despite the popularity of bagels today, they were not a big hit in America at first. That would change in the 1970s when bagels exploded in popularity across the broader U.S. after Lender's began marketing frozen bagels.
Now my new Lender's bakery-style bagels stay chewy and delicious for days and days.
The way he stared at the camera as he took that bite. Mmm.
While we're on the topic of round breakfast baked goods that have a hole in the middle, let's talk donuts. The modern donut, as we know it, is widely believed to have originated in the 18th century, when Dutch immigrants brought them to New York. Back then, they were called oliekoeks, or oily cakes, which sounds more like a used hamburger bun than a delicious breakfast treat. The recipe evolved from there, with a
look at that
19th century
mountain of
ship captain
donuts,
claiming
goodness
to have
me.
created the familiar donut shape with a hole at the center. While that anecdote is disputed, what is certain is that World War I saw the donut become cemented as an American staple. Volunteers in France gave donuts to American soldiers in the trenches to remind them of home. Then in 1920, a guy named Adolf Levitt invented the first donut machine. The ability to mass-produce donuts instantly made them a symbol of progress. And at the 1934 World's Fair, they were seen as the food of the future. Back then, a donut cost a mere nickel, which made them accessible to almost everyone.
A nickel's 5 cents. I mean, is there anything you can buy in America right now for 5 cents? Like literally anything? I don't think so.
Even those hit hardest by the Great
5 cents.
Depression. And by the 1950s, Krispy Kreme stores were in 12 states, and donuts were considered the quintessential American breakfast food. But while all this seems straightforward enough, the origins of donuts are actually contested. Fossilized versions have been found in Native American settlements, throwing this widely accepted narrative into question, and also making us wonder why no natural history museum has donut skeletons on display. In 1901, Force cereal changed the world forever by showing up on supermarket shelves with a mascot on the box, Sunny Jim. It's hard to believe now, but this was a pretty big anomaly for the time. People were not used to Captain Crunch or the Honey Smacks frog. Sunny Jim was so wildly successful that other cereal brands took notice and began to develop their own mascots. Beginning in the 1930s, cereal mascots like Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Tony the Tiger, Captain Crunch, and
They're
Toucan
great.
Sam were introduced and proved to be just as successful as Sunny.
Man, if you've got one of these old boxes of cereal, like but in really good condition, they're probably worth quite a bit now, aren't they? But you'd never think to keep a cereal box, would you?
Arguably, more so. Which one of you has actually heard of Sunny Jim?
Kinda
Then
creepy,
in the
to be fair.
60s, the cereal mascot's star power received a major boost from the introduction of color TVs in homes throughout the country. Cereal companies used their compelling characters, complete with elaborate backstories and complex plots, to market their cereal to kids. It was an extremely successful tactic, with one minor problem. The cereals marketed with cute cartoon mascots were, and still are, usually full of sugar.
Super Sugar Crisp is coated with super sugar to make it taste so sweet.
Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, public health organizations urged companies to scale back their aggressive targeting of youngsters. The Children's Television Act of 1990 limited the number of advertisements in kids' programming. And in 2006, several major companies pledged to use their characters to market healthier options. We like to think Sunny Jim would be proud. Whoever the hell he is.
Man. That face
So
is
what
kinda
do you
scary.
think? Which of these breakfast foods do you?
Crazy to think that the donuts, or I think it was the bagels actually, could be, the invention of the bagel could be as old as, the ancient Egyptians. Thousands of years. Like that's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy. And it's always fun just to see the early sort of versions of things that we have today. Like the early version of the toaster, the one that you put the bread in and you kind of have to flip it. It's in that little holder that you flip over. Like back then, they must have thought, wow, this thing is so cool. It's so convenient. It makes making toast so much easier. But now, the average person would be like, mate, I don't want to use this. It's going to take me forever. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.